But the only way to get saved is to believe it. It only works if you believe it. As he would go on to point out to people, he'd say, so what's the difference if I believe it or not? Did he die for all men's sins or not? If he died for all men's sins, what difference does it make if I believe it or not? He died for mine. Even if I don't believe it, he died for mine. Well, what is the difference? He used to tie them up and go round and round in circles, and in his day he was an unusual man, but today you hear a lot more of that kind of thing, that people realize the whole picture doesn't quite hold together. It comes up, unfortunately, it goes by the same name as another controversial subject. Creationism is talked about a lot in North America, at least, and by that they mean that God made man like this, he put him together. But the older meaning of that word creationism referred to the difficulties of inherited sin, because it was pointing out, where is this sin that everybody has that they're born with? And the teaching is, it's on your soul. And you say, where did the soul come from? Did my parents make it when they made me? No. God makes the soul when the parents make the person and God puts the soul in. So they say, well, then how did it come with the sin? Did God make it with the sin on it and give it to me? I say, no, you inherited the sin from your parents. Yes, but I didn't get my soul from my parents, so how did the sin get there? How did the soul come with the sin? So some, in order to explain that, came up with another thing which you don't hear talked about too much because it was never popular, but they talk about what's called traducianism, which is to say, well, we were wrong after all. God does not make souls. The parents make the soul along with everything else when they make the baby, and that's how the sin gets planted in there. That's an idea that never really caught on, but that's how people try to explain away this thing. So, in conclusion, what I'm meaning to get at is not to say, I have a whole lot of ideas here, and the idea is to prove that somebody's wrong and I'm right. I'm not even interested in that. What I'm interested in is that people realize there are a lot of questions that deserve to be re-examined, that it's not such a neat, wrapped-up case anymore. It needs to be thought about. People give the impression sometimes that they're thinking about it. You know that half of the printing done in the United States is done by just a small group, a handful of churches. Half of the printing, I'm talking about all the paper and ink in the United States, is used up by a handful of churches. You'd think that means they got a lot to say. But in all that printing, they don't look at these issues. You see, my point is, even if the Muslim is wrong, somebody has to be able to establish that that's the case. It has to be examined again. We can't just say, well, they always told me that, and this man's smarter than me, so he must know, and leave it at that. We're supposed to finish all things. The Quran mentions in a verse about one man who was guilty. He was a criminal. What was his criminal act? Says he heard something and then he didn't check on it to see if it was true. That's a crime in Islam. If you hear something but you don't make sure it's true, you just let it rattle around in your head, maybe forget it, maybe keep it. What you hear, you're supposed to check on. If it's an argument, go through it yourself. If it's a fact somebody said is in that book, well, then you ought to find that book or find somebody that's seen it. Make sure what he said is true. So I thank you for your time and attention. I'm glad to have the chance to be here. I believe the time was set aside for some questions, so we'll see what we can do. I'm just going to suggest, maybe if you don't feel at ease standing up in front of a crowd or whatever, maybe you can write a question on a piece of paper and pass it up as well.
Sir, it occurs to me that though various religions sprang up different times from different countries. They all preach and teach the same fundamental truths. If I may summarize in 3 words, love all, hate none, we are one. They, I think, never divided the one humanity into races under various labels. I think they also the planet Earth as one country and humanity as one family. But under the very guise of the very same religions, under various labels, the followers have divided the humanity into various countries and into various religions, and wars and fights are going on. Countries manufacture arms, they maintain military armies, produce nuclear weapons, and it seems that Satan is more powerful than God now. I think it seems that we have come to a scenic turning point, a climax in human civilization, that we should get all the basic teachings, fundamental teachings, the agreeable teachings of all religious teachers, and teach them under one title, like world government religion, to unite all for the welfare of all and to prevent a nuclear war which would bring about total annihilation.
All right. Just on my comment, all right. In a sense, I suppose I agree with you right down the line. It's just that I have to qualify that sometimes when that sort of thing is stressed, to say, this is our problem, we have to solve this, so we shouldn't necessarily talk about these other things, is often what happens. People that don't talk about these details of theology and so on. Well, it might seem to be a good idea, but the difficulty concerns, back to the thinking again, that things are all supposed to be one piece anyway. So unless you get some of the important things sorted out, you're not going to function properly in this other project you're trying to do anyway. As I said, I told a story about one man who's a famous preacher who, he said there was a certain thing that he just couldn't believe it was true, but every time he preached it, his head hurt. Because he couldn't believe it was true, but he knew it was part of what he was supposed to preach, and his head hurt. And then one day he promised God that he wouldn't doubt it anymore, and he said the headache went away. Head doesn't hurt anymore. Well, he disconnected a valuable circuit in his brain. His brain's trying to tell him not so fast, something's wrong here. So if you tamper with the circuitry and say, now this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to hang on to it anyway, suggesting that influences the processing, the output is going to be influenced by this if everything is not functioning properly. Just a thing I mentioned the other day, you can take an elaborate computer, if you sneak around behind and open the cabinet and maybe cut one wire, the thing will still work most of the time. But every once in a while it'll spit out some nonsense because you've damaged it somewhere. So it's not necessarily advisable to lump up a lot of things and say, well, these don't matter, we'll set them over here. Maybe a lot of things don't matter, but we've got to be careful which ones we set aside. Say these things don't matter. Just as if somebody says, well, if God is 1 or 5 or 7, it doesn't really matter. No, I would dispute that. I think it matters, because if you get that wrong, you're going to mess up somewhere else later down the line. But I think you probably agree with me there too. I'm just adding that to what you said, that sometimes people, maybe the only thing they know is to say, no, love, 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 love. You see, and they say that, and you have to wonder, do you even know what you're talking about? Love? Love, if I love somebody, is when if I see that he's doing something that's going to hurt him, if I love him, I'll tell him that's going to hurt you. So sometimes love may mean you have to be harsh to somebody, or tell him something he didn't want to hear. But if I say, love, 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 oh, say what you like, I love it, it's beautiful. You may not even be loving the man. You're doing him harm. He needs to hear some advice from you sometimes, some advice he doesn't like. Okay?